So this week we're going to look at content organization. How you organize your content is really important in ensuring that your message gets heard and, more importantly, it gets understood. There are a lot of different ways you can organize your content. I'm going to show you each one, and then I'm going to share with you times when you would use each of these different methodologies. And when you put your educate me together, this is the central part that you're supposed to concentrate on is how did you organize your content to make sure that people could follow you step by step. You don't want to be reverting back and saying, oh, I forgot to tell you this. You want to make sure that it flows in a logical progression and that everybody understands the message that you're trying to get across. So now let's take a look at the different methodologies that you can use to organize your content. Is one method better than another? It depends on what the purpose of the message is. If the message has a purpose that talks about, let's say, the best burgers in each state, then yeah, there's definitely going to be a methodology that works better than others, and I'll talk to you about that as we get into the subsequent slides. So the first content organizational style is to use chronological. And you can do this in one of two ways. It can be the earliest dates to the latest dates or the latest dates to the earliest dates. So for example, when Google brings up a search parameter for you, they search and they put up the newest information, and the oldest information is found much later on further pages. If you were, for example, maybe talking to investors about your company, you might want to go with the earliest to the latest. You might want to go with, this is how we started, this was our first year in business, our second year, our third year, so and so forth. And the reason you do that is because you want to show your growth. So there are different times when you would use earliest to latest, and other times when you would use the most current to the ones that are the least current. It's useful. This format of organization is useful when you're assessing changes over time because it allows people to see that progression. Or if you're assessing progress, we used to have 10% of the audience, then we went to 15%, and then we went to 20. That is why you would use a chronological. And this is also a good example of a way that the human mind thinks. We think in progression. So it is a really good process to use when it comes to anything that has progress in it. Another form of content organization is to do it problem to solution. Now, this usually contains some form of recommendation. So when we do a problem to solution format, we lay out what the problem is and what we think the solution to the problem is going to be. And then subsequent to that, or in the bottom part of that writing, you would put what the recommendation is for improvement. That, by the way, is called the indirect methodology, as we might remember from our previous class. You can also reverse this. So you can say, here's the solution. And the reason you would use the solution to the problem is because everybody kind of agrees that this is the right solution. You don't expect a lot of pushback. In that case, you would lay out the solution and you would say, what this is solving is this problem. So your recommendation occurs really early on. We use this a lot in business because a lot of times we are writing or talking about, a problem that the business has and how we think we can solve it. It is a really good form of content organization if we are talking to a boss and, he wants to understand what your recommendation is. In business, we are often asked to give a recommendation, and I asked you that in your Casual Friday. I want to talk about two different methodologies for what we call the writing approach. The first is when the result is clear and everybody's going to be likely in agreement and everybody knows the facts and you don't have to necessarily go back over them again and again and again. And time is crucial, or it's going to a busy CEO who really doesn't necessarily want to rehash every part of the story. When this is the case, then what you're going to do is you're going to use the direct methodology. And the way the direct methodology works is what you do is you give your recommendation right up at the beginning. You say, here's what I think is the best way to solve this problem. And then if you decide you want to give all of the information, you can do that maybe in a writing mechanic, or you can do it by laying it out in some type of here's the basic information. However, there are times when we need to do a lot of convincing. And when we need to do that convincing, we want to use that indirect methodology. This we use as the way we lay out our information when we think that the reader or other readers may not have all the facts and need to understand all the facts. We also do this if we expect pushback. If we expect that there's going to be a challenge with getting people to agree with our perspective, we want to make sure that we massage the situation first. And then the last thing that we do is to make the recommendations. So we start off, we educate, the reader, and then after we educate the reader, then we decide that we're going to, lay out all the facts and try and get them on our side and persuade them, and then finally make the recommendation. We see this format a lot, this importance to least important or least important to most important, although it's more likely to run most important to least important, when we have a number of factors that we want somebody to consider. And so we start with the most important factor or the most important element or part of the product or anything like that. So it doesn't get missed. It gets right up front and people understand that that is the most important. You don't want the most important thing to get lumped in with all of the other points, because sometimes what will happen is people will start picking your argument apart, and the really important thing in there just gets lost in the shuffle. This is a really important style of content organization, and it's useful when you're covering a lot of points, right? You're ensuring that the reader focuses on the most important ones, but you're providing them with all of the factors so that they can make an informed decision. Lawyers use this a lot. This is a format that lawyers use a lot. That they might say the number one charge against you is this, and then these are subsequent charges that we have to deal with. This is a really interesting form of content organization, and not one I see often in business, but I want to make you aware of it. We see this, I worked in a research firm, and I saw this a lot in research, and it's more where, we people think some people think in a part to whole, and some people think in a whole to part. Some people are good at puzzles, for example, and other people just can't seem to get their act together when it comes to that. So this is a really good example. This is a really good example of when we would use this in research. When you're laying out what the big picture is, and then showing the correlation on all of the small pictures, and vice versa. And this was really popularized by a theorist. His name was Gestalt, and he popularized the fact that our minds are structured to either see the big picture or to see the pieces and putting them together, and that we're half of the people think one way and half of the people think another. So sometimes it is useful if you're working with someone and they can't grasp what you're trying to tell them. I once told a finance professor of mine that he needed to break it down for me, because I really wasn't getting it, when he just laid out the big picture. And so apparently I am a part to whole thinker. I saw the use of cause and effect a lot in marketing. When we lay out content marketing, it's not unusual for us to say, if you buy this, this is going to be the end result, right? If you buy this product, you're going to feel better. And when you feel better, you're going to lose weight. And when you lose weight, you're going to fit into those pants. And it was this like progression where we're trying to get people to look in the future. In order to do that, we showed them a cause and a causality, right? This is what can cause that to happen. You can also do it what's called a chain reaction. One causes two, causes three, causes four. And again, you see this, I see this a lot in marketing. You'll see it a lot in commercials. If you start watching commercials, you'll see it a lot in that as well. It is something that can easily be used if you feel that you want to also make people aware of the fact that if they do something, it could cause a negative result in the numbers, or it could cause a negative result in the, in the review percentages, or, whatever it is that you wanna align to that cause and effect. Now, this is a content organization style that we used a lot in sales. You want to compare one product to another or one company to another. You use a side-by-side comparison, right? Or you could lay out 3 products and compare them side by side so that you can highlight, candidly, you can highlight the pieces of your product that are the most important and avoid the things that really don't make your product shine. So compare and contrast is a very common method of content organization for salespeople. You do the point by point, or maybe you could do, a side by side across 6 different parts of your product, or whatever it is. But you get the message. This is a really good piece, really good style of content organization if you're trying to convince somebody that one is better than another. Regardless of which content organizational method or methodology you use, you still have to help guide the listener or guide the reader, if it's a written piece, by using what we call connecting words. So first, next, then, after, finally. These words help to guide the listener. The other thing that it does is, if you're speaking more so than if you're writing, it lets them know to listen back up, because you're going to give them another step in the process. And so this is a really important aspect that I want to see in your Educate Me videos. I want to see those connecting words, step number 1, right? Or first you do this, next you do that, lastly you do this. It gives the content structure, which is really important, because people want to know, am I getting close to the end? I mean, come on, we all face it. We all want to know, are you getting there? And then it allows for backtracking. As I stated in step number 1, right? It allows you to backtrack a little bit. So try and use connecting words in your written educates, and in your spoken educates. Finally, the last thing you want to take a real look at is the content flow. You want to feel that the content flows and it's not choppy and it makes sense. And you can only do that by going back and reading or listening to whatever it is that you're offering us. It needs to be logical, because we do think in a logical progression. We do think in a left to right, and it needs to be appropriate to your audience. And don't make any assumptions. Don't make any assumptions, especially if you're going to educate us or you're going to tell us about something. Make sure you share it in a way that makes sense.